So so we will look at basic knowledge, methods, methodology, physiological reactions, and in the end, I'll show you at least some of the more or less recent studies that are available, some of the studies we did. Just to give you a short overview, the certificate is about a 2-day class. So we will have an hour here, just so then you can imagine how small the topic or the view might be I'll give you today, but still just go on and ask or write me an email later on. Just let me know if you have some more questions about the topic. So first of all, the question is, what is electromyostimulation exactly? And it is more or less a stimulation of the skeletal muscle, not with the normal drive, going with a command by the central nervous system through the efferent phase or efferent what's it called, nerve lines to contract the muscle with the information from the muscle back to the central nervous system. Yeah, I contracted, I had this or that changes in length or power. But with EMS, you have an external stimulus, an external electrical stimulus, which innervates the muscle, leads to contraction, and this information goes back to the central nervous system that there's an external stimulus which led to the contraction of the muscle and the accompanied power output. This is very easy explained, very easy to understand. And it's important to understand that, sorry for the German slides here, but that we are stimulating the nerves. So in the end, for the muscle, it gets a information or a stimulus, which doesn't matter if the stimulus, if the information you have to contract is produced by the central nervous system or by an external electrical device, because all we stimulate is the nerve. And then the nerve reacts with its normal physiological protocol to make the muscle contract. But the interesting part is what happens physiologically. I will come to that in a few slides. So EMS is not new. Stimulating of muscles using electricity is a very, very old. There are some anecdotically or historical stories, legends that they used, what's the English word? Eels, electric eels, to in medics in the 1700s, so 350 years ago, to counteract headache within people with electrical shocks produced by these animals. But for us, or in the more recent years, it was used in the medical area as well, in the rehabilitation area, to treat edemas, for example, in medical context, but the preservation of muscle mass in rehabilitation for people who are not able to stand up after a surgery, for example, EMS was used a lot. And the restoration of muscles when the people after a surgery or after an injury were not able or were able to move again, but they used the EMS devices, the method of EMS, to support the rehabilitation process. And the EMS itself is used in elite sports since several years now, because they realized that the effects of EMS, if they are well planned and used with caution, are very, very potent to increase muscle strength even more beyond the normal strength training itself. Potentially, we will see what's in the recent literature about that. So to sum up a little bit the possibilities of electromyostimulation, you can I will get it everything up here. You can split a little bit, because the question is the EMS stimulus bigger than the muscle contraction you can do willingly by yourself, then it's more for the preservation of muscle mass loss, preservation of muscle mass loss during immobilization. So perhaps, for example, people who are not able to move because of an injury or because of any kind of problem they have, they are not allowed to use muscles willingly. You can add EMS to counteract these atrophy effects. Another example might be to use it in space to prevent muscle mass loss during stay in the orbit. They didn't use it due to different other reasons, but physiologically it was a big discussion to use it on the International Space Station up in space. The second one is, as I said, if you use EMS as a support method or as a method to support your training, to build up, to rebuild muscles who are not as strong as they used to be, to facilitate this process, to use it during rehabilitation, and more or less not only elite sport level, but if you use EMS but only as an additional stimulus, additionally to your normal training, to your willingly high muscle training, strength training, and muscle contractions, you can use EMS to even more increase the power during training, the intensity during training, and to increase your muscular performance even more. So we have different types of electromyostimulation, just three on the market, just that we know, or you know what I'm talking about. My research is more in whole body EMS. The device I was using a lot in the last years is from Miha Bodytech, a German brand, with a vest where the electricity cable is connected to, and then you have straps around the upper arms and the thighs with electrodes within the vest for pectoralis muscle, abdominal muscles, and lower and upper back muscles. And the last pair of electrodes is for the glutes. So a whole body EMS setup you can train with. Your only what do you say? The only problem might be the cable connected to the power control. Then you have on the right side more and more brands coming up with suits with integrated EMS electrodes working with batteries. And so the electricity comes out of a battery, and the control of the intensity is done by an app on the phone, for example, whole body EMS as well. And then in the middle, you have these classical devices, I would say, with single electrodes connected or wireless, controlled by some kind of handheld, perhaps Compax, from my point of view, one of the biggest brands on the market. Very, very nice to use, but with pros and cons on both sides. By definition, we define whole body EMS with when you use more than 4 muscle groups simultaneously. Everything you are stimulating 1 up to 4 muscle or muscle groups, then we are talking about local EMS. This is interesting if you are talking about the effects of EMS and the setup you would like to use EMS for, because it has some differences. And the most important differences from my point of view are listed here in this table. Let's stick with the local EMS first. You have most of the time you have single muscle groups on one side of the body stimulated. For example, you had a injury on your right leg, then the injury on this leg, or the muscles on this leg, are very weak, atrophied muscles. So you want to build up this faster and don't want to build up the other leg as well. So you place the electrodes on the atrophied, on the injured leg, and just train on one side, unilateral side, this leg. So you have the plus and the minus pole on the same muscle. On the same muscle. The type of drills are most of the time static, isometric, and passive. So very often only the contraction of the muscle is only produced by the EMS and is not supporting the willingly contraction of the muscles. And therefore you have obviously a very high fatigue on the muscle which is stimulated by this EMS or during the EMS. So only the, for example, thigh muscle is very fatigued, and the whole body itself or the rest of the body doesn't feel that fatigued as well. On the other side, for performing training, this is very important. If you use whole body EMS with more muscles and more pairs of electrodes being used during the training, you're training more or less all muscle groups, obviously depending on the number of electrodes, but I think you know what I mean. So you use more muscles, and one other big difference is that the current, the electricity is going not from the start to the end of one muscle on one side, but you have plus and minus on, for example, both upper arms. So the electricity, the current is going from the right to the left biceps or upper arm in this case. This makes it to a very high intensity type of exercising, makes it to feel the fatigue very, very central. So the fatigue after a whole body EMS training is very much all over the body and not only on one muscle, for example. So this needs to take into account if you're working with elderly people, for example, with people coming from a surgery or from an injury. But it makes it very, very effective on the other hand. But you need to take that into account if you work with people. So what does electromyostimulation do? The question is, what makes it so good physiologically? A small step back, a small step away from EMS, we have two types of muscles in our body. I hope everybody of you knows, with the slow twitch fibers on the one side and the fast twitch fibers with two under types, I would say, with the 2A fibers, more or less intermediate fibers, and the 2X fibers, the biggest and the strongest fibers, working on a very high intensity level. 2X fibers, and most of the time we are using the slow twitch, the type 1 fibers. These fibers are used with regards to what we are doing. If we need high fatigue resistance and we don't need very high speed or very high intensities or very high amount of strength, then we use the type 1 fibers. And the more intense, the more the speed increases, but the shorter the stimulus is, the more the type 2A and the 2 type X fibers are used. This phenomenon is very old. It's known as the Hahnemann size principle, known since 1965, recruiting first the small alpha motor neurons, then the bigger ones, and in the end, if we need all our power for a short period of time, then we use the biggest alpha motor neurons innervating the type 2 fibers. And if you look at the size principle, perhaps on a more practical graph, this is here. First type 1, the more intense it becomes, the more type 2A, and in the end, the type 2X fibers are used. EMS leads to a totally different recruitment pattern. EMS leads to a activation of all 3 types of fibers right from the start, more or less independently how intense the contraction is, or the willingly contraction is. In the moment you switch on the electricity and the current goes through the muscle, all 3 types of fibers are activated, which leads to a faster fatigue for the muscle or for whole body MS, for a faster fatigue for the whole human, the athlete. But from my point of view, it makes it a very, very helpful training method to have an easy training of type 2 and to type 2X fibers. You don't need high intensities, you don't need a high willingly activation of type 2X fibers, which is not possible for some people, for elderly or for rehabilitation processes, for example. So it's very useful if you need to increase high or one repetition maximum, maximal strength, maximal speed. And this makes it so interesting for all kinds of people who are not able to use or to achieve high intensities during their training. But you need to take into account what I said a few slides before. You are reaching your fatigue, you're exhausted a lot faster compared to normal training. And sometimes it's especially for people who are not they don't have a good feeling for their body, then it's even stranger and makes it harder for them to realize that the training they are doing, and perhaps even if it's fun, that they are exhausted so much. So you need to be a good coach. You need to have a good experience with this kind of training to see or how to adapt the training regarding or with regards to the athlete you're training with. So let's come to the parameters which are important and which are interesting in regard to EMS. There is not that much you can adjust if you buy a certain normal EMS device from a certain brand. This is the control panel from Miha Bodytech. You can adjust, or you can make some adjustment before you start training, but during the training, the only thing you can do is to increase or reduce the intensity of the electricity per muscle. And especially there is no real unit for how high is the current or how high is the electricity, but you have a percent of up to 100% of what this device can do, and not in voltage or ohm or whatever. So, but first of all, the most interesting parameter you need to take into account is the hertz, the frequency the current is sent into a muscle. And here are some interesting studies about the question: what is the best frequency for increasing strength or increasing endurance performance or increasing rehabilitation purposes, for example? If you look at the EMS studios, nearly every studio is working with 85 hertz. And I will show you later where this 85 hertz are coming from. From a physiological point of view, you can use up to 200 hertz, which is possible. Depends a little bit, the very low end, 2 to 10, 15 hertz doesn't feel very nice. And the higher hertz values are leading to a high fatigue, but not leading to good results in the power output. So the most commonly used frequencies are between 50 to 100 hertz approximately. So Compax is giving some examples of what they expect, which frequency is best for achieving different goals. You see that the lower frequencies below 10, or let's say below 20, are more or less a stimulus comparable to an endurance training. I will show you a study later on in a mouse model where this has been shown. But if you look at the applied studies, at the practically relevant studies, you don't find that the lower intensities are better than the higher intensities. but at least from a in vitro point of view, a laboratory point of view, this might be the case, but still. The higher the frequencies, the more intense, the more contractions occur, obviously, per second. And as I said before, in the EMS studios, there is 85% the standard hertz they are using. But there is no study showing that these 85% are better than 60 or better than 100 or whatever. This 85%, just to give you an insight into how this market develops, is the 85% are coming from the first 5 or 6 studies about EMS training, which were published, whole body EMS training, which were published around 2005 up to 2010 approximately. And these 5 to 6 studies, they all showed a positive effect on maximal strength, on reducing lower back pain, on reducing body mass, and so on and so forth. And all of these 5 studies used different frequencies. And the mean frequency from all of these 5 studies were 85%. So there is no study showing that, as I said, 60 is better than 100 or whatever. This is a mean of successful studies. The most recent study is this one. It's from 3 years ago, from Michael Fröhlich and Wolfgang Kemmler. They are working a lot with whole body EMS in Germany, in Kaiserslautern and in Bayreuth. And this is 3 years old. More than 10 years, they used 85% because of they don't know better. So, and now they did a study with the comparison of one group trained at 20 hertz, one group trained at 85 hertz, and one control group didn't train EMS. They only did the exercises without EMS training. They trained for 10 weeks and 1.5 sessions per week. This is due to you don't do that much EMS training per week, so they did 3 sessions every 2 weeks. This is why it's 1.5 per week. And the results showed nothing. They had no changes in the control group for jumping and for sprinting and for maximal strength and maximal flexibility. Control group, nothing. Obviously, they didn't train that much. And for the other 2 groups, 20 hertz and 85 hertz, they had no differences. They jumped higher, they sprinted faster, they showed a higher flexibility, but no differences at all for a low frequency group and a high frequency group. And this is a nice study, a well-controlled study, well done, everything we would like to know, higher or lower hertz frequencies, no differences. And this is just 3 years old. So more interesting during the doing is how high should I turn up the intensity? So the strength of current, how high should it be? The question is, or the problem is, we don't know how high it should be because we have different resistances for electricity in the human body. This is an example. So you are you are putting the stimulus, the electricity, up on the skin, and then the skin has its own resistance of approximately 1.56 kilo ohm. Then the fat 1.2 kilo ohm, and then after some centimeters of different resistances, the current reaches the muscle. The muscle itself has some resistances as well, and perhaps from a mathematical point of view, from this 130 volts coming into the muscle or coming into the skin, perhaps 20 volts reach the muscle, but we don't know. We have no possibility to measure what reaches the muscle itself. There is no possibility. So therefore we stick to a very practical solution in the end. Sorry, I'll come back to this. We use what the athlete likes or what she or he is able to work with. If you're increasing the current until it hurts, that the athlete says that's enough, then you go back to approximately 70% of that, and nice movements, nice training is possible for them. They feel the current, they feel the muscle contractions due to the stimulus, due to the electrical stimulus, but it's not hurtful, it's not painful for them. And there is no difference for people with lower subcutaneous fat or people with higher subcutaneous fat. There is another study who asked the athletes to rate how high is the pain due to the electricity. They checked how high the electricity was turned up before the athlete said, no, that's enough, that's too painful. And then they measured the skin fold, the subcutaneous fat in millimeters, as you can see here, on different sides of the body for males and females. But they found absolutely no differences for more fat needs more electricity. It's totally, there's no correlation at all. More important is that the athletes who are using electromyostimulation has a good, are good hydrated, that the muscles, the fat, the skin has a lot of fluid, that the electricity can go through more easily, that the resistances are reduced due to the higher water content in the tissues. So then we have the type of the impulse. I'm not an engineer at all. It's totally hard for me to describe that, but just that you know, we use the biphasic impulse type. So we have current on both sides, plus and minus. The monophasic impulse type is only used during medical treatment of edema, for example. For the physiological exercising, we are using biphasic impulse types. And in the end, the question is how long is the electricity on and how long is it off? We don't have the electricity going on all the time we are training. We have on and off phases. For beginners, we have most of the time 4 seconds on and 4 seconds off. If you are more trained, if you're more familiar with EMS training, you can reduce the off time, that you have longer on times. But this is depending on what you like, what kind of exercise you are doing. And in studies we are doing is it's in parallel to the exercise drills we are doing. For example, if we do a squat, a deep squat, we are switching on the current during the decrease, during the down phase of the squat, and leave it on during the what's it called in English, during the way back up with the
eccentric and concentric phase.
Thanks. And have a short pause, a short recovery period where no current is going on between the repetitions. Makes it very, very tricky, but for scientific purposes we do this this simultaneous working. EMS is safe if you're working within some borders, within some medical questions that need to be asked for the people, because there are some exclusion criteria where you should not use EMS. For example, if you have a pacemaker or a heart patient, it obviously makes not that sense to have electricity in the chest area, to have a injured heart, a sick heart, and which has problems to beat itself. Then you go and stimulate with an external electricity stimulus. I wouldn't do that. It's not allowed at all. Then second one, which is pretty logically from my point of view, no electric stimulus for pregnant women, especially in the lower abdomen and back area, and especially in the first and the third trimester of pregnancy. But I wouldn't do it at all with pregnant women. Not in the area of cancer cells. The electricity can lead to improved cancer cell growth, so this should be avoided as well. Not in active deep vein thrombosis or thrombophlebitis, just to make sure that the EMS is not leading to emergency, what we call emergency cases. And there are some more rules or precautions you should take into account before starting with EMS training. These are, from my point of view, the 4 most important ones. Many of the others are more or less the same as for normal training. You wouldn't train if you are sick, for example. You wouldn't train if you are taking drugs for high blood pressure, for example, or you wouldn't train if you are on drugs. These are all things that are listed here in this Canadian Physiotherapy Association protocol. But this is an important factor to consider, that there are different types of precautions for EMS training. So, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't, this one is the only slide I didn't translate. This is what we use during training with EMS, especially for people who are training the first time with EMS. And then we say you have this strength scale with regards to your muscle contraction, not with regards to exhaustion, but 10 you can see is extreme strong muscle contraction, which really hurts. And 0 is obviously nothing. And then we want a training, we would like to have the electricity, the stimulus, we switch it so high that they feel a light up to a middle muscle contraction. So we would like to have a 5 on this scale, for example, for the beginners, and for the more experienced athletes, experience with EMS in this case, we go up to 7, not more. This is enough on a scale from 0 to 10. This is how we control training intensity. We don't have or other way around. If you have in mind the control panel of the MIA BodyTech system, where you can adjust the intensity in percentage up to 100%, I don't care if my athlete says, okay, today 60 is enough, and the next day he can do 70%. I don't care. He should focus on the feeling. Do you have a middle strong muscle contraction? This is way much better than stick with some numbers on the control panel. So just a few slides for the scientific basis of electromyostimulation. Most of the studies have been done with isometric local EMS. So many information or facts about electromyostimulation of strength can be increased by 40%, and muscle cross-sectional area can be increased by 50%. Most of these studies have been done with local EMS. As you can see here, nearly 80% of the studies have been done on the quadriceps femoris. And the setup is this then. They have isometric contractions of one muscle, and the training protocol looks like that, for example. They have 4 sessions of training per week. In this case, they did it for 8 weeks. And the content is 40 isometric contractions per session. This is training content. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, but it's very hard to translate these results from isometric EMS contractions without willingly contracting the muscle additionally. But it's very hard to translate these results into practical applicability, like sprinting, like jumping, like whatever. Like if there is no movement during training, we know that the increase in maximal voluntary contraction isometrically, they are good. These are the results from the study, Gondin et al. We'll look at this in a few seconds. The results are good. We have an increase in maximal voluntary contraction for, in this case, knee extension. The quadriceps femoris is getting stronger, obviously. But the athletes are not able to use this increase in isometric strength during dynamic movements. Sometimes we are not measuring increases in dynamic maximal strength, even if we measure isometric strength increases. And these are results. Nice study, don't get me wrong, nice study. These athletes in the setup you saw a slide before, they all increased their maximal strength after 4 weeks and even more after 8 weeks from, yeah, you see 250 Newton meters up to 330, a lot. Very nice study. And the same was true for the cross-sectional area. So the hypertrophy effect of EMS training is very good. All individual trends you can see here are going up. There is no non-responder. Nice. But the utilization, we call it utilization, is more or less not existent as long as you are not doing movements during the EMS stimulation. You can do quite normal exercises with EMS. You need to be careful, obviously, if you have a full power gas EMS stimulation on your upper body, on your thigh, upper leg, then you need to check that the landing works good. But in the end, you can do a totally normal workout in the gym, supported by EMS training. And then you are training your coordination simultaneously. And this leads to translation into sporting performance. We call it utilization into sporting performance. There are many interesting studies showing that the increase in strength due to EMS needs to be translated. And if it's not possible to do exercises with EMS, then you should at least doing dynamic exercises immediately after the EMS training to achieve this translation into practical disciplines and practical doing. The normal EMS training session is lasting 20 minutes, up to 20 minutes. This is enough. If you have a whole body EMS training session, even good athletes are exhausted after 20 minutes of training. So one might say, okay, this is very nice. We have one or maximal 2 training sessions with 20 minutes per week. This is even better in with regards to time saving training compared to a normal walk to the gym where I need to train even longer. And this is a nice study from Wolfgang Kemmler again, checking what is more effective, a EMS training or high intensity strength training. They used, in this case, males, middle-aged, a little bit overweight, and they did 16 weeks of training. One group did a normal strength, high intensity training 2 times per week, supersets. And the other group did whole body EMS, slightly less per week, and more or less core exercises. They do movements, they use EMS, whole body EMS, and then they perform the exercises they are performing are with movement against the EMS. If you imagine you have EMS on more or less the whole body, so that means independently of the movement you are doing, you always have to work against the contraction of the antagonist muscle. So the normal movement's becoming very, very exhausting. And here are the results, looking pretty pretty full, but it's easy to understand. We have fat-free mass before the training and after the 16 weeks of training for the high intensity group and for the EMS group. Sorry for German again. But in the last column, we have the delta from pre to post. And you can see there is more or less no difference. The fat-free mass increased by 0.86 in the high intensity group. It's not statistically significant, but perhaps a little bit more than in the EMS group. Then we have percentage body fat are decreased by a percent approximately in both groups. Then we have increases in strength in both groups. So no differences between these two types of training, conventional and EMS training, in more or less untrained individuals. So this leads then to the conclusion for the authors that both time-saving exercising programs are good to use to increase health and to increase strength, and then it is more a question for what do I like. A plus for EMS is it is attractive, it is something new, it is time efficient, and you have a higher pressure to come to the training, because normally you have one trainer for one athlete. So the guy is just waiting for you. This is, from a psychological point of view, much more difficult not to go to the training than just to go to the gym where no one cares. But for the gym, of course, it's cheaper and you can do it whenever you want. You don't want this one-on-one support, and you can make it on your own. Some people like this even more. So, but from a physiological, from a applied point of view, it doesn't matter what are you doing. Both EMS and classic strength training is both effective. Then the question is, what is metabolism doing? If I'm correct, if the information I gave you are correct, then a lot of muscle fibers are activated simultaneously. That means, from a theoretical point of view, if I'm using all my muscle fibers and not only parts of the muscle fibers, then the oxygen consumption or the energy consumption must be even higher during EMS training than during conventional training. This is again Kemmler. He is the only, not the only one, but the one doing the most in whole body EMS training. They did a 16 minutes workout with these settings: 85% 85 hertz frequency, 4 seconds on, 4 seconds off the current with this setting. So 60 minutes. And they did squats, they did biceps curls, arm extensions, and so on and so forth, all without additional weights, everything against their own muscle contractions. And they found during these 60 minutes a 17% higher oxygen consumption or calorie consumption compared to the control situation, where they did all these exercises but without EMS, obviously. But of course, the group who did EMS training felt it more exhausting, and the control group felt relatively easy during the training. Or yeah, you are using more energy, you're burning more calories, but it's more intense in the end. Same idea from an Italian researcher group, more or less similar study design. The only difference was that they only did isometric exercises, as you can see here: holds, planks, all different types of isometric contractions. And they found pretty comparable results with a little bit less increase in metabolism due to EMS compared to control group. But in this case, the exhaustion or the perceived exertion was similar, more or less. I promised you in the beginning that I show you something about endurance and low frequencies during EMS training, because this old study here, Atherton, said that low frequencies try to mimic endurance type training, at least on the muscle level. And they did a mouse study with the mice being stimulated for 3 hours at low 10 Hertz frequency, or the other muscles were stimulated at a high intensity training, more or less, with 100 Hertz, 63 seconds bursts. So pretty high volume in my eyes, but pretty low pretty low time and high intensities. And then they analyzed the signaling in the muscle, showing that the low intensities with 10 Hertz are leading to an AMPK signaling going up. So endurance training effects on the molecular level. And on the other hand, that the PGC1 alpha, the muscle growing protein, is going up after the short bursts at high intensities. At least on a mouse level, this seems to be true, but we don't find it in the end in the adaptations on the practical level. We did it EMS not during in strength exercises, but we did it in 2 studies during incremental endurance testing. And you see the results here. The EMS group needs a little bit more oxygen during the submaximal intensities, especially during the higher submaximal intensities. But in the end, the VO2 max is pretty similar. And the same, sorry, this was down here, VO2. And the lactate was a little bit higher here in the end. But in the end, the maximal values at exhaustion are same in both interventions, with or without EMS, but maximal was lower for EMS. That means if you're using EMS during endurance training, you will be fatigued earlier. You have a higher, it feels more intense than the endurance training without EMS, even if the differences on a physiological level are not that big, but it feels more intense in the end. And this is first, more or less the last slide. There's one paper, if it's 10 years, it is 10 years old, but and it is a single case study. You can see it here. Could low frequency EMS training be an effective alternative to endurance training? Single case study in 1 adult. So they did 1 subject, 5 sessions per week for 6 weeks with 45 minutes of EMS with 10 Hertz. No training at all, just sitting on the couch using EMS on his muscles. And increase in VO2 max by 4.5%, increase in peak power output during incremental testing, reduction of resting heart rate of about 18%, and reduction in blood pressure of about 20%. So nice. Doing nothing, just using EMS in front of the TV seems to work, at least in this adult.
Was it an untrained adult?
Yeah, look at the values. Yeah, okay. 300 in peak, or heart rate rest.
Yeah, yes. 49 milliliters VO2 max.
Yeah, not very trained. Yeah. So my last slide to that topic, just to give perhaps a slight conclusion and an easy conclusion in the end. I like EMS. I was very critical a few years ago, but for some people, it's really interesting. It is an easy training for people who are not able to train with high intensities, and they are able to increase maximal strength, for example, to increase quality of life again. Nevertheless, you need to be aware that it's very fatiguing, more fatiguing compared to normal training because of much more muscles activated simultaneously. From my point of view, if you are interested, or not, if the other way around, if you're not afraid of new training methods, it's fun. The motivation is quite high for people who are experienced EMS training for the first time, but it is expensive. If you are going to an EMS studio, it's about 20 to 30 euros per 20 minutes. So it's pretty expensive compared to a normal fitness studio in my eyes. Depends on what you like and what your aims are, I guess. But it's an interesting thing, even for high level athletes who are reaching a plateau, who are stuck in their increase in performance. This might be an interesting tool to break through a little bit, to get a new stimulus to increase training quality even more. Yeah, so far from me, from as a first overview about electromyostimulation training. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from you?
I'm still muted. Christoph, thanks a lot. Thank you for the nice presentation. Any questions from the students, from the participants? What would you like to know? Then I have a first question. So I'm really a relatively newbie to EMS training. So my first question would be, how applied is it, or do you have any idea how applied is it in high-level team sports? Yeah, like soccer, like basketball. Is it used on?
I think it's individual. If there is an athletic strength and conditioning coach who has experiences, who has good knowledge about it, it might be used. But what I know, it's not widespread. I used it with Rimpa, handball's second division, as I was in Würzburg a few years ago. It was fun for some of these guys. But in the end, obviously, you can only have 1 or 2 devices in your club due to costs. And then it's tricky to handle logistically.
Another question, do you know are there any studies about the extent of muscle cell destruction in the different intensities of EMS training? Yeah. Are there any studies about creatine kinase?
Yeah, there are a lot of studies. I skipped this topic. There, due to the fact that you are using a lot of type 2 fibers, that you have a lot of mechanical stress on the muscle fibers. You have always some muscle working eccentrically. You have a lot of muscle damage. That's true. And this is the reason why you're not allowed to have more than 1 session per week.
So that could be one reason for the high adaptation, for the relatively high adaptations to EMS training.
You will what's the word? You will familiarize with EMS training the same way you do with normal training if you do it for years and months. Yeah. But in the beginning, it's very effective because of that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have a high rate of type 2 fibers working, which is, let's be honest, relatively difficult for people to do it just with barbells. Yeah, you really need high intensities, a good and proper technique. Yeah. So it's not really easy to apply intensities to provoke or to get the type 2 muscle fibers working.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
Okay. But I assume the soreness, the muscle soreness after EMS programs is quite high. Yeah, so the perceived muscle pain after these training sessions.
Yeah, definitely. I have some backup slides. This is the green one. I don't know if you are into creatine kinase as the protein which is released if you have muscle soreness, if you have muscle
muscle cell destruction.
Thanks. Yeah. This is after marathon. You have baseline values of about 100, 150 IE per liters. And after a marathon, you have, yeah, see here, 2,500. Here the standard deviation is missing, I'm sorry. And this is after EMS. So it's brutal in the end. Yeah.
And those of you who ever did run a marathon or have marathon, I mean, the pain I personally experienced after running marathons or even half marathons is absolutely, yeah, it's a 9 out of 10. Yeah, most after most of my races, I have a really very, very, very high level of muscle pain.
Yeah, but where? Which muscles?
Yeah, the running muscles, calf muscles.
And, right, totally agree. And the reason for these high creatine kinase levels in EMS is that you have more muscles than only run muscles.
Okay.
You have the whole body being
okay.
killed.
Okay. And do you have any backup slides about perceived muscle pain, as in not just only the creatine kinase values, but like something like perceived muscle pain?
No, sorry, not in this. Not in this slide. We have nice values for. We did not we. I was involved, but not in the end. 16 minutes, 1 hour cycling training with and without EMS. Easy pace, 70% VO2max classical basic endurance training, high volume training, and we have RPE of 12 without EMS. And they are going up to 17 with EMS, same intensity on the bike. It feels hard. Yeah.
Okay, so could be quite intensive.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, it's your opportunity to ask some questions. Christoph is a really nice guy, always very helpful. It's a unique opportunity to get some information firsthand. Okay.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
I was playing basketball and we were using compacts because of our ankle injuries. But is there any study that it's really impacts on the speeding up recovery and injury times?
I'm not sure if there are special studies about injury rehabilitation, but there are some studies, as I showed, about the building up of muscle strength and muscle volume in the thigh and in the calves. I'm not sure about post-injury training.
I mean, for me, as I said before, yeah, I'm really a newbie to this kind of training, but let's assume that you have a sprained ankle or something and you cannot run as a basketball player. Yeah, if you have injured a joint, which makes it impossible for you to run, I guess it could be a good alternative to get the muscles working. Yeah, to get some the type 2 fibers contracting without the impact of the landing. Yeah, from running. It's just an assumption.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. This is done by injured athletes.
Okay.
During being injured. If you have a sprained ankle, then you can train your calf muscles with EMS while sitting on the couch.
Yeah, I guess you can contract your muscles quite to a high extent. It's better than just laying on the couch.
Right.
Mete, in what kind of scenarios did you use the electrostimulation as a basketball player?
I can describe like when I injured, our masseur or physiotherapists, after 2 or 3 days later, there was a complex and they are asking like it's hurt, and I say it's hurt, and probably he's you know, down the volume, and it's like 10 minutes or something like that. But I was thinking like it's speeding up the recovery time. And when I asked him, and they said it will be more, how can I say, you will get back to court sooner than normal. And I thought it's about the you know, injury, but you said it's about other muscles and calf muscles like that. So okay.
Yeah, it depends a little bit. It depends on the type of injury. If you are using the electricity, the current as a stimulus, you can stimulate your tendons or your ligaments as well. But I'm not sure if it doesn't feel nice, from my experience, not to have it on a muscle. The muscle is more comfortable. The only thing you are doing is you're trying to increase blood flow to the injured tissue. Perhaps
probably yeah. That's why they are doing complex. Yeah. Blood flow. Yeah.
I assume you used it then at relatively low intensities, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, why not? It's the question about how does it feel. But why not?
Okay, cool. Any more question? Who is brave and interested and has a question? Okay, then one question from me. So let's, Christoph, as you know, we are in endurance sports, yeah. So it's one question related to endurance sports. Let's assume we have a endurance sport where you have a lot of impact, yeah, like running, yeah, or like let's assume we have a triathlete. So the impact, the running kilometers per hour per week could be quite a tricky thing. Could it be one training method to reduce the running kilometers? So let's say the impact load, yeah, and could it replace some running kilometers in any way, I mean, to just reduce the running kilometers? Or let's say we have a sprinting athlete, yeah, and we have to be careful. Maybe he has some sensitive joints or sensitive bones, maybe an athlete who experienced stress fracture multiple times. Could it be something to apply this EMS to reduce running kilometers and get to get somehow muscle contractions that replace the running?
No, I don't think so. You can increase muscle strength to make it possible to run more, to have a higher muscle quality, but you don't, but it's, from my point of view, it's not possible to replace classic endurance training with EMS.
Okay.
Just by EMS. You can support it on the ergometer, on the treadmill, but this doesn't reduce the running miles at all.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I had the same assumption, but I still wanted to ask. Okay. Yeah. Any closing comments? Any? Okay. Then as in every advanced training method, I would be interested in long-term studies, of course. Yeah. So at the start, you have some good effects, some high effects, but maybe after 6 weeks, after 8 weeks, or let's assume after 6 months or 8 months or 12 months, maybe the effects start to diminish or start to go away. Yeah, but on the other hand, with EMS, I'm not 100% convinced that this would be the case, because they provoke type 2 muscle fiber contractions, yeah, which is pretty much a potent stimulus. So I'm not convinced that you have very fast, so that the effects are diminished very fast. So it could be long-lasting effects, I guess.
Yeah,
but
I guess I agree. Yeah, interesting.
yeah, but with like it is often the case, yeah, we need long-term studies, and long-term studies are difficult, yeah, are expensive, and it's not so easy to convince the participants to participate at this study for a long time. So Christoph, thanks a lot for joining us. Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing your insights on that subject with us. So we should spend Christoph an applause. Yeah, something like nice claps or something. Yeah, you get some virtual applause. Yeah. Okay. Then thank you. I hope we will see each other soon again, Christoph. And